Okay, so Mary Arnold-Forster qualified as an architect in 1992. She's a member of the Royal Incorporation of Architects of Scotland. She was elected a Royal Scottish Academician in 2016 and has won numerous awards and featured in prominent journals for her work, not least the RIAS Award for New House at Haste in 2018. She has worked, have I got that right? She's worked for architects Stanton Williams and Patel Taylor in London and David Miller in Glasgow, then for 16 years working in the remote and wild sites of the Highlands and Islands with Jewel Chaz Architects. She's now the director of her own company, Mary Arnold-Forster Architects. She says of her practice, "I am interested in creating quiet, humane, restrained and beautifully crafted places and spaces based on rigorous study of site, context, landscape and brief, and try to create a backdrop for people's work and their art and their lives." As well as, and often, in parallel with my work, I've managed to fit in a great deal of mountain walking, sea kayaking and biking, and have a deep love of and an amateur understanding of the beautiful landscapes I've had the good fortune to work in. And working through COVID, Mary says, the lockdown doesn't make a huge difference to me other than I usually have my team here. I can do my things standing up and pacing while thinking and going outside. On her work-life balance, she recently said, "Mine is that there aren't any boundaries between the two. They roll into one. I can be wandering around the Highlands and setting up anywhere to work. I get a call from someone far away and I make it into a 5-day event, throwing my kayak in with me and to turn it into a jolly." Therefore, folks, it gives me great pleasure to welcome for her own self-designed house in rural Perthshire near Dunkeld, Mary Arnold-Forster. Thank you, Mary.
Hi. So thanks for the introduction. I am sitting in my studio and I'd like to, I built this studio and house 4 years ago. I actually built this as a kayak store and I was going to semi-retire. I don't know what I was thinking, that never happened. But so I changed my mind on it. I'll take you around the office, but mostly I'm interested in the process of how we build. So we build, all my projects are in, almost all the projects are rural based, which suits me because of my desire to be in the landscapes. So it's not, it isn't a coincidence that I spend a lot of time walking, biking and kayaking. And so I've seen all these sites. I've seen everyone else's buildings as well in the Highlands. No one can get away without me seeing them, I have to say. So I've been to every, if you look at the West Coast, I've been up all those hills, I've climbed, cycled them and I've kayaked every edge. And I've just read twice actually, David Ganger's book, The Frayed Atlantic Edge, and he kayaks that edge and he looks at all the archaeology and the ruins in a kind of forensic way, and I completely get that. So I'm always looking for clues in the landscape. Even if I'm going on a kayaking trip, I'm looking for clues. So we work, the phrases that go around in this office are making the ordinary extraordinary, show some restraint, reduce, distill. We do that a lot. So we do it's a very intensive process. And we use models a lot. I'm going to show you some models to show you what scale, and sketches a lot. So I draw a lot. I know a lot of, I'm that age, so I sketch all the time. I have piles and piles of sketches everywhere. Shocking amounts of paper I get through. Quite a lot of it goes on the fire. So that's the fire that heats the studio. So I draw all the time. I'm kind of very slow at CAD, so the younger guys just take it off me. They're like my technical minders. And then we make models for every project. We make models of landscape. So this is just showing, this is very ordinary, this is an ordinary township on Skye. It's a linear township that used to end in there's a church at the bottom and everything in a pier. It's now a fish farm. And there's very simple buildings on there. It's not about big views. It's not about, and my clients wanted to settle in that landscape. So what we did, we looked at the settlement pattern on the macro scale and we looked at the landscape. So we look at a landscape from the macro right down to the micro. I'm endlessly looking at contours. I look at contours anyway for the levels and how we sit buildings on landscape, how to make it look, the lightness of touch actually takes an awful lot of work. So this model is of haste. Is that good? Can you see that, everyone? And what we did was we inserted 2 little buildings in there, which are so quiet and so modest that you can drive past and not know that we have been there. That's the intention. And the result is that the clients have been accepted into that community. They just have a concrete slab that they sit on. There's no wall of glass. There's no, I hope there's no ego there. And these buildings are quietly very powerful. And it's also, it's about I'm interested in form and mass and siting rather than decoration. So there's only 2 materials and there's very little detail. It's reduced to its most basic level. And that's the house we built. It's very beautiful, I think, and strangely dark, but they like that. There's only 4 windows, one, and it follows the passage of the sun from east to south to west to north. And it's sort of quite moving. When the sun hits it, the house glows, and you're very aware of where the sun is. So you're very aware of the season and the time of day in it. Then we go on to more detailed models, but they're still about landscape. So this is all cork, and we're taking the existing contours and carving, doing as little as we can to the landscape to sit the building in. And the building is a response to that landscape very directly. And we try to do as little quarrying and as little rock breaking as we can. This is another one. These are a scale of 1 to 200. And I'm going to come back to that. That's the house at Ned. And it's also the RSA diploma project. Then we go up a scale again. This is 1 to 100. And this building, we buried a lot of the bulk of the building in the landscape. So what I like about this model, I don't know if you can see these models though, is it's very clear what's landscape and what's built, just simply on the colour. So we had to dug quite a lot of the building into the ground to lessen the impact of quite big building. Then we go on to bigger, this is just one room. We build models of rooms, these physical models. And then we do very simple techniques with just an angle poise to show the passage of the sun and how it hits the building and how the quality of the light hits it. So these models are working models, and as such, we've changed things based on what this model tells us. So every project has at least one model. This is a treehouse project. This is set in a birch woodland. These are all these other models. This is even the conversions have models and the extensions. So we're building models. I got to build that one myself, and then we have design sessions where different people come up with different ideas and we put them on the site model. We also, this model is just a corridor to show the quality of light that comes through that with the slats over it. So the models are really important to us. After all, it's a 3-dimensional art. And then there are lots of sketches around, slightly skew. I'm allowed to do the sketches. No one else wants to sketch.
Mary?
Yeah.
I wonder if you could slow the video down so we can stop on 1 or 2 of them for a bit longer. That would be great as you're going round.
Too fast, okay. So I do a lot of very quick pencil sketches, and then so this one, for example, is looking at an elevation study. It doesn't take me much time, but I really encourage the guys who work for me and any students to keep drawing. I mean, I know I do draw all the time, and but some of the younger architects and students are scared of making a mark in case it's not art. But I don't pretend to be an artist. I just draw all the time. And these drawings are more. So I do a lot of this kind of thing. In the freehand ones, quite often the planners and the clients like them more than the renders. I'll just show you more things in this office before I take you outside, because I lived in the middle of, a lot of my jobs are single dwellings in landscape, and this is unusual for me in that I got to build in context, which I really enjoyed actually. I'm surrounded by the art of my friends. My friend lives on North Hewitt. She's an artist. She does a lot of work with peat. So I like to have it around. I still collect art. I've inherited that from my mother. So this is the studio. And when before the pandemic, there were 5 of us. It's quite intense all through the winter. If I was to get the fire going, and we work away quietly up here. These are my bikes, and these are my kayak paddles. So it's just this is all my kayak. Yeah, I'll just take you outside while we've got the light.
You've frozen on us, Mary. If you
Lecture doesn't, unless 30 seconds. So there's a in this little town settlement. There's a farmhouse where my friends live. I'm here. Sorry, Fungal farmhouse. And what particularly gripped me about it's the way the buildings emerge from landscapes. Some of these existing stone buildings, the direct relationship on the micro of how they emerge out of land. I'm always kind of gripped by. And then there's the existing farm, and then the existing studding, and then the miller's cottage is up here. So this is, the context is there was the missing gable. Can everyone see that?
yeah, we can see it now.
I got to do the piece. I got to do the piece in the middle, the missing link. And so the scale and proportion and massing are very traditional, and the treatment's very modern. And I got to do single material buildings. So I've got a timber house with a timber roof and a corrugated office with a corrugated roof. So I'm using materials, and the way we detail it with a rain screen cladding detail rather than cladding expresses form and massing rather than the materials themselves, if that makes sense. So one of the things I always encourage students to do, apart from because they can do amazing things with sort of software, but the basic long section remains a really important drawing for me. So I drew the long section through that house, through the site into the studding, so that I could piece these 2 modern buildings into that place properly. So these sections, I draw sections all the time. I don't read, elevations just come at the end. So I can show you around would you like to see around the plot? Quite a small plot. I'm very keen that people live in small houses. I live a very happy life in a small house.
Yeah, Mary, go on. Just be aware while you're outside, it's more stuttery, so just slow the images down so we can see. That would be great.
Okay, so this site, the planning was for a house that sat in the middle, quite a small site, which sat in the middle where the grass is. So I turned that planning inside out and built on the edge. So I wanted to create, for this, because it's an inward looking site rather than outward, which is what I had lived on Skye, I'm trying to make a walled garden, and I can blame my grandmother for that because I have a big thing for walled garden. So the house here, the timber element, the project, is one side of the walled garden. The corrugated studio is another element of it. Here is a perforated rack that takes my sea kayaks, and there'll be another wall here when I can get round to a greenhouse. So I'm creating an inward. This was inward looking. It doesn't have a big view unless you go upstairs. So I've created, and architects talk about an outdoor room, but really I use this small garden a lot. So to have had the building in the middle with all the space around made no sense to me. You'd have 2 meters, and I call that sort of prairie architecture, where you put a building in the middle of the site and it all gets very vague around it. So I've made the buildings form the edge of the courtyard or wall garden. So I can take you into the house. This is all timber. It's a rain screen cladding detail. And the elevation, the main gable elevation entrance, I only wanted 1 opening. So you can use this rain screen cladding detail to hide things, and it's a really lovely way. And it gives you a deep wall. I love a deep wall, especially on the gable, a deep wall. So my boss in Glasgow said, don't puncture the gable, Mary, stop puncturing the gable. So behind here you can open things up and you can find the electrics. I put slats over bathrooms, and then I framed the entrance.
Do you want to
So this
explain,
floor,
Mary, do you want to explain
sorry?
what, would you like to explain what a rain screen cladding detail is? What is rain screen? I don't know if everybody understands.
It's quite, well, it's not the last line of defense. It just forms the rain screen, and behind it we have a membrane. I use it to hide the rain pipes, the gutters, the overflows, the fans, so that this interest in form and mass and scale and proportion is expressed through the architecture. I don't need to really want people to look at overhanging eaves, because I'm really interested in buildings, how they settle precisely in landscape for me. And then on top of that, it gives me a deep wall to play with. So you put the windows in different places in the wall. But this is all, I don't know how much people are interested in that. I've got it's a way of expressing things in a very simple way. It's a formal expression rather than different materials being decorated. I get very anxious with too many materials for a start, really. I don't do, decoration for me is quite hard, really. So on the floor here, this is the local quarry. So the quarry at Blairgowrie just dumped all their stuff and we ground it down. So the materials are as local as I can get. So I've made a terrazzo floor. I probably can't see it. Looking back out into the walled garden from here, it's south facing, so it means that I barely have to heat this house. And then I have it's small. It's 96 square meters. It's absolutely specific to me. It's the way I like to live. So some clients come around here and go, it's just not big enough, or it wouldn't work for me. But we do site-specific and brief-specific architecture, and this is absolutely about me. So there's a big kitchen where people can gather. I have a wood burner, which once on, actually, this house is too warm. It's so heavily insulated. And I've used very cheap materials. This is just a render which I've sanded and waxed, and I've just got pine floor that I've bleached and waxed. So I'm quite interested in using simple materials, but in a kind of sophisticated way.
Mary, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you show us what you're talking about a little bit longer? Because
yes, sorry,
we see you all the time, but we don't see the house.
But that is the Blairgowrie quarry.
Right.
Now I've done this at the house recently on Iona, and we used the quarry on Mull, and we used there was a pink granite in it, and my client said, I'm not sure about the pink granite. I had this vision of being the architect in the floor picking out the pink gravel, but actually it's utterly beautiful, and it is very specific to, that granite on Mull. So it's about that place, which I'm kind of pleased about. I mean, concrete's a difficult material, isn't it? And you have to manage clients' expectations. So crack, I'm quite like the cracks. I find them really interesting. This crack here, I'm going to fill with gold, I think, one day, Japanese way. And enjoy the crack, I say. And then this is, do you want a bit of art? I bet you're all artists. That's Caithness by my friend Alex. So I like to, I've inherited it from my mum. I like to buy art from people who need the money and who are alive. That's my main thing, and that I love. So this is Wick, this is near Wick, which isn't everyone's, romantic Scottish landscape, but it's a very horizontal landscape, and I rather love it. And it's just by my friend. And so the things I wanted to do here was make this a wall rather than, floor to ceiling doors, no skirtings. You can't get away without the handles. So when I'm on my own here, this is my spare room. It feels like my own space. But the spare room is full quite often. So again, no corridors. What's the point of that? No internal halls, waste of space. So we just have a guest bedroom and a Patrick Heron. Bit of art. And so it annoyed the builders that I had no skirtings. It annoyed the builder that had no architraves. But he got round it in the end. There's a room in there. Tim Gibbs on the wall. And then I can take you upstairs. There's another room here. I like small spaces need good storage, I think. And that's simple plywood. So yeah, I think it works better if you can store stuff away.
Could you see the rooms, please?
Sorry, again?
Could you be a bit slower, please? Because
sorry.
we can't actually see things. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. So that's just the place I live. It's small, but I've stayed in a lot of bothies and camped a lot, and I think it's fine. And actually, I've found over the years some of the most intimate spaces that I've built or lived in are the most used. These huge living rooms where there's a gathering of sofas and things. People quite often need to be close to each other to have that proper conversation. So this little space here is really well used. I'll show you my sitting room. It's absolutely tiny. So yeah, I don't waste space with corridors. The double height space is only over the stair. This house cost under 200 to build. So this is pine, so no stringers. It's all about the movement of the stair up the. Is this all right? Look, tiny sitting room. And this is built for a woman who's 5'8". It doesn't work for a 6'4" person, and it doesn't work for a tiny person. So it's all about me. There are no doors up here. It's my own private bothy, really. Anyone can come and visit. So you make a small house feel very generous by opening it up like this. The spaces are defined, clearly defined, but they're not separated. And this is where I start to get a view upstairs. So if the view is transformed when you go upstairs. And that's my house. That was where that's a nice piece by Catherine. And there's a nice piece from clients. So that's one of my clients. And these are friends of mine. So that's my little house, forming one side of the wall garden. And this is the office. This is made of, the office is made of fibre cement. That cost about 20,000 to build. That doesn't sound cheap, but in building terms it is. Again, I'm using a rain screen cladding in a one material building. And there's no, that's fibre cement, which is my response to the steading next door, which is of course asbestos. So the wall garden, tiny site. So you can make a small site work for you if you're careful about it. I think this site was for sale for a long time because it's quite small and people didn't get the potential, but a good architect can get potential out of any leftover bit of land, I hope. I'll take you back into the studio and look more closely at Ned. Is that right, Alana? Can you bring the photos up?
Yep, will do.
Yeah. I don't know if, so this is this project. I'm going to talk about this particular project because you don't want to hear about all of them. So this is a project up in Ascent. Yeah. So this site is a little bit of a pocket. It's a really ordinary piece of land. It's a rocky, peaty, grassy corner of Ascent. And there's masses of this in Scotland and masses of it there. And yet people buy a view, don't they? They buy a dream and they want me to frame that dream and make that dream happen. But actually sometimes they don't actually look at the site. And I'm interested not only in, like I say, the macro, but the micro of this site. I was interested in the grasses and the rocks and the wildflowers and the pure sort of piece of it. And then what's odd is if you see the boundaries of this site, they bear no relation to the topography. So I suppose I don't know who defined this site. It's really odd because it has nothing to do. It's a rectangle dropped on this huge expanse of rocky peat. So I was always puzzled by that. But so the key is to make a model. So you get, and the models are just fantastic for showing you what you cut through. You cut through this extraordinary piece of land in a completely arbitrary way. And for this site, I asked the surveyor, in fact, I hovered over him, to survey every rock. So that, you know how there's very little soil in that part of the world and you've got the rocks forcing their way through. I managed to go back several times without the clients, which can be nice. So you don't have to design. I don't like designing in front of clients. So I need to be there at different times. And I managed to fit it in with the rest of my life. So I went back a few times and I couldn't get my head around why this particular rectangle had been identified. It was the most arbitrary and yet the most precise piece of land. So I decided that I'm more and more don't want to get a rock breaker. Does everyone know what a rock breaker is? You put it on the end of a digger and it crushes rock to make a level site. I didn't want to make a quarry. There's quite a lot of in the Highlands, people making a quarry and sitting a house in it, a generic house. And that's not, I'm not really interested in that. So there's no rock breaking on this site at all. I want to pour less concrete, so no ground bearing slab on this site. And finally, I wanted to build off-site, build the house in a factory. And architects talk about it a lot, building off-site and delivering to the site. So I wanted to follow it through. So this form comes, which is quite unusual, comes from two things. One, I wanted to hang the building between these two, to these higher levels, hang it in the sort of underbelly of it, so that you bury this that you hang the building low in the landscape. I wanted to use technologies called cross-laminated timber, which is a technology that we should be making in Scotland, but we're still importing at this stage. And it's a building block of timber. I've got the piece here, obviously, somewhere. And I wanted to go back to massive building rather than cavity construction for all sorts of technical reasons. I don't want to go on about. Here's a bit of CLT. So the planner had put conditions on this site for a white rendered house with dormer windows facing the other way. And you have to be brave or experienced, I suppose, to just say don't worry, we can get a low-lying black charred larch building looking the other way. And we can do it by presenting a clear and well thought through argument for the planner. So we did that and the planner was fine. So these conditions of planning, well, it's one of my rants with the planners, which I won't go into. So there are 3 volumes to this building. It's very sculptural. The first volume is 5 units. The other, there's a 4 unit and 3 unit. And the size of these pods is absolutely a direct result of what lorry can get up the road. So the first thing I asked was how big a flatbed lorry can we get up? And so they told me 2.75 is the width of all these pods. So that the method of construction, the method of delivery informed on the design, as did the landscape. So it's not arbitrary. This is about the landscape, it's about the clients, but it's also about the method of construction. So there's no steel in this building. It floats above the landscape on little concrete pads. There's no way of avoiding it. And instead of giving the client spent quite a lot of time designing a wall of glass that looked over the view, but I thought it was more interesting to lead you on a journey through this building and reveal the view at the end. And it's much more powerful in my view. It also stopped us breaking into these little hillocks, because there's nothing special about them, but there's nothing, they are special in their own way. So the CLT, there it sits, and then I pushed it over the edge. So we cantilevered it over the edge. And I spent a lot of time settling that building into land and doing sections through the 2 hills to make sure it's set up properly. And then these were delivered, there are 13 of them, and the glazed link was a little bespoke element. And then the cladding again is a rain screen cladding, and it's my take. The builders looked baffled when I said this. It's my take on the birch in winter. You know how the silver birch in winter is that sort of dark browny purple, and it's sort of fine. And I rather like birch in winter. Obviously in May it's absolutely transforming, but it's also rather beautiful. And there's a lot of native woodland there: birch, hazel, these oaks and things. So this is my take on the birch in winter. So this cladding system is a rain screen cladding system again. We've got no exposed roan pipes. I'm interested, like I say, in form rather than applying things to it. And it's so fine that it bends. So mostly you'd worry about cladding bending and wood. And the joiners were saying to me, but this is too fine, this cladding, it will all move. And for once I could say, I'm fine about it, let it move. So if you look closely, this cladding is slightly wobbly, and I don't mind. And it's now weathered a wee bit, and it's much more like the rock. But yeah, it's a great project. I get to stay there, which is great. Make friends with your clients, that's a key. And she says it's your house as well as mine, and they're very happy. I think it performs really well. There's no heating system in here. I'd like to see Scotland produce this material. We had to import it from Austria. It's a good solution. I'm not the only architect Robin will talk about it as well. I'm not the only person who talks about it. The interiors are very muted. We can use this CLT as the finish. We don't need to put plasterboard or anything around it. The two things I said to the client by this time, the other thing about this is the client couldn't read drawings, and she just didn't understand drawings at all. And that's not her fault, that's my fault, that I couldn't explain this building through drawings. I tried models and things, but because we built this in a factory just outside Inverness, she could go around it. So she got to walk around her house before we put it on site, which was really great. We built a one-to-one model, and then they took it apart, and then they brought it here, and then they put it back together again. It's a little bit more complicated than that, obviously, but that's the basis of it. So it's great. I'm really pleased. So that's the glazed corridor that links the three, and you can see that the form of the three forms is carried through into the corridor. And there you can see the view at the end of the journey through the building. Top glaze, I call that the fifth elevation. There are a lot of flights, for example, that go over to New York and Canada from this part of Scotland. So you can see the flights, you can see the clouds scudding across. So that's, I call that the fifth elevation. So I also persuade the clients not to only have the big view twice, but that if you frame some of the more intense immediate views of rocks and heather and grasses, you get to framing them. They started to appreciate why I was going on and on about moss and peat and grass. They didn't get it really. And once you framed it, they started to get it, yeah. So there's the wobbly cladding, the birch in winter. I could, and that project, we were going to get it judged for the RIAS, but that obviously doesn't happen, which is a shame, but never mind. No rock breaking, minimal concrete, timber, solid construction, and overcloudiness, birch. And great thing about working in Highlands is, and there you are, as is camouflage rather than, architects talk about losing buildings in the landscape, but Robin's right, that's camouflage rather than lost. So what else on the website that you might want to see? And we can show you. Is there anything in particular, Alana, you would like to see? And I've got models and drawings of it here.
Can I ask about that building, Mary?
Yes.
Is the roof made of CLT as well?
Yeah, the whole thing. Because if you imagine that it's like shipbuilding. You build the whole thing as a slice.
Right.
And so it's kind of obvious. You just don't let services cross. It's not daft. So the kitchen fits into one, a bathroom fits into one. So we don't have services crossing over these boxes. So they can come pretty much finished. There's a bit of second fix, but the first fix in and they're fully insulated and fixed. These panels are demountable as well. So there's this, it's a controversial idea, but demountability is seen as sustainable, whether it works or not. But these cladding panels loose fitted on a split batten, so you can take them off and you can move the building.
It struck me as it's flooded with light.
Yeah.
From the outside, you imagine it might be quite dark because of the panel on the top. I suppose the inside is very light, isn't it?
Yeah, so the top, the link, the model is very abstract, isn't it? But it shows that the link, we've done it in Perspex, is a glazed link, a negative link, and that we brought the cladding inside. Again, we're reducing the materials. We've just got the birch, the black cladding, the CLT, and a negative, kind of grey floor that is really cheap, and you know. So we're reducing the palette. We're always reducing the palette of materials. If anyone in this office, there are 3 guys who work here. Sometimes they go, why are you struggling? And they go, I need a third material. And I go, it's just, no. I mean, occasionally a third material, but very rare, really.
Mary,
yes.
I'm just on your website just now, and I introduced this at the introduction, but the project Heast that you won the RSA award for, I wonder whether we could have a look at that, Alana. It's back in the main menu.
Yeah. So the clients were is an academic architect and rabbi. So the rabbi really had no. She doesn't really have any she had no visual understanding. She had no 3-dimensional understanding what was going on. She just kind of trusted me and her partner, who's an architect, who's an academic. So I've been commissioned by academic architects before because they want to build, but they've lost touch with technology or how to build. So Helen, it was a proper collaboration. Helen and myself and a most amazing builder, and it was the kind of quietest. There's no stress to this project whatsoever. So we're using a black corrugated sheet, which is a very simple agricultural building. We've reduced the wooden openings to bare minimum. For me, you know that idea that of the view is very modern, really. If you lived and worked in these landscapes even 100 years ago, you wouldn't need a view because you worked outside. Now these two are endlessly outside. There are other jobs. They've now got jobs which are looking after mountain bothies, helping out in allotments and so on, and they're outside. And it's not a site of big views. It's making the ordinary extraordinary, and here it is in the township. So you have a rabbi and an academic moving into a township, and you want them to feel comfortable there. So you want to build something quiet and respectful and not without ego and things. There's also a corrugated chapel. There's quite a few corrugated buildings on Skye, churches, dwellings, and there's right next door to it, there's a corrugated chapel that's pretty inspirational. So here, so for someone who likes to reduce palette of materials, this was a joy, and it's a exercise in joinery detailing and crafting spaces, carving spaces with one material. And so I've got a lot of joinery, timber detailing experience, and myself plus the guys who made it, we pulled it off in the end. These guys made absolutely a beautiful job, and it really upsets me when people read about builders, because I've worked with some of the most amazing craftsmen. So between us, I detailed it and they built it, and there is my take on the box bed. So my client said, we don't want a second bedroom, we're introspective recluses, we don't want, but I said, but I need a second bedroom. So I managed to get a bed in there. I have to stay in all the houses I built, well, 99% of them. So that's where I stay, and that's where they study. Because everything is made of Douglas fir, every single element of the inside. Well, there's a bit of a tile or two in the shower room. So this is very specific to them. So Judith has a bathroom upstairs and Helena has a shower room downstairs. Judith has 3 different places where she studies, and they have this big volume. They don't really want rooms, and this is what we built. So it's an exercise in Douglas fir detailing, and again rain screen cladding. So there are only 4 views. So that's the east elevation, very simple entrance, and that's the bedroom above. Then the south elevation, so that's looking north. That's all they have. That's all they have. The photographer walked in, so this is heaven, because this is how they live. It's not made up. And then they have storm shutters. These are my sketches. So the storm shutters go over the west elevation and the south elevation. So the south and the west elevations typically take the prevailing winds, but quite often have the great view. So I put storm shutters, and I built them into the body of the cladding. So I have I can use the rain screen and the deep wall to do them flush into the walls. I don't need to apply anything. So I don't know how technical or dull this is. There's that model, which is the landscape, and it kind of works. And we used very simple we did use some poured concrete instead of decks and slabs imported. We just got Steve, who happened to be really good at this skill, one of the builders, to make a really simple slab, and they sit there. And as a rabbi, you'd have thought in a pretty Presbyterian but everyone goes and talks to her. She's amazing. She sits on this concrete slab, and people come to her. So they have settled in, and I'm really thrilled. I'm really thrilled that we built something so quiet and yet so powerful that people aren't intimidated to come and meet their new neighbours. So yeah, it's and it glows like that. It's an amazing shot, isn't it? Rather beautiful. So we're not only doing timber interiors, we do a lot of negative interiors as well, so that people can hang their art and put their lives up there. And I'm using a clay block as well, which is a great material, because I can use lime and clay renders internally. I've done a clay block house, and that gives a thermal mass and a solidity that is really enjoyable. And it's specific to my client's site. And yeah, so I'm using clay block, CLT. I'm using timber frame. I only use wood fibre insulation. I don't use any foams or plastics or metal vapor barriers anymore. And then things that people can't see, that I'm still kind of insistent that we don't do that. Timber frame remains just, but less and less so, the cheapest way to build new in this country. We're using a lot of different cladding systems. We're using a core 10 steel at the moment, which we've got a sample out here, which we're checking weathering. So we're checking our materials and we're testing them here. So we've left a piece of steel out there to see how it weathers. I'm worried about it in a marine environment, so we're checking all that the whole time. This is a massive building in the Lake District we're doing. We've got exposed structure. There's no steel at all in that building, and yet it cantilevers, which I'm really pleased about, and it floats. Again, I've buried a whole floor of bedrooms in the ground, so the clients are indulging me, so it's a bit expensive burying buildings.
Mary, I wonder whether this is a good opportunity to open this up a little bit. Absolutely fantastic. Really privileged to see around your house, your workshop, your studio, and an insight into those pieces. The thing I wanted to ask first was, you're living in is this the first time you've lived in a place that you've designed yourself?
No, I built 3 houses for myself. I can't stop. I'm sure I'll build more. Yeah, it's not. It's instinctive. I'm not, and I don't. If you're the architect, the client, and the builder, then there's no argument.
Because I know as a painter, if I'm living with one of my own works, I'm endlessly analysing, wanting to change things. Do you find yourself doing that, or are you?
Absolutely, yeah. There's no such thing as a perfect house, and I can walk everyone around and say I should have done like that. I see it as a permanent experiment. I mean, it is much easier. So I live alone, so there's no one to sort of say that's horrible. I work obviously with a lot of couples, and you're unpicking their brief and their relationship rather too much sometimes, I have to say. And I'm a really bad marriage guidance counsellor. I'm sure I've done a lot of damage.
I was about to say, you need to be very diplomatic in those situations, I guess.
Yeah, there's a skill to it, but you have to judge whether you're going too far, really. But when people come with a brief and they just have a list of rooms, I say, well, I can do that. I just need to know a bit more about how you live and how you hope to live and things. And then on the other end of the scale, I just had a fantastic weekend on Iona with a photographer. And this is a house he's just photographed on the beach at Iona. And it's a cracker. Well, mostly it's lovely because she lives there and she's happy. I made her happy. What could be nicer, Happy client. It's just really moving when you go back. And it's made a huge difference to her happiness. She's a ceramicist, and a lot of her work is It was very collaborative again. If you look at the back, it's a private thing between her and me, but I'll tell you anyway. At the back elevation of her house is inspired by her work. And she does these little, she's called Rowena Brown, and she does these beautiful little houses with these little opens. So I've responded there, and then we've worked on materials together and the tiling and the layout. And whenever she sells a piece, she buys from another ceramicist. And so we're displaying them. So these are very bespoke projects, and it's a journey. And I'm with them all through the journey. You know, I'm right at the beginning, we're talking about the brief, and I'm right there at the end, testing the outdoor shower. That's one of my jobs.
Great. Folks, go on, Robin.
I think one of the interesting things is Frank Lloyd Wright was really pleased because one of his clients said they'd chosen him because he was an architect of principle. It seems to me, Mary, that you are very much an architect of principle.
Why is that terrible?
Sorry?
Principle? Oh dear.
Well, I'm sorry, I see that as a compliment.
Thank you.
But one of the things I was going to raise was there are huge issues about the climate emergency now.
Yeah.
And you must be limiting some of your, the fact that you don't use steel and you don't use plastics is terrific. And concrete is a bit of an issue, I'm afraid, but
difficult with, and also there's sort of fundamental things like we can buy floor slates from India and probably mined by children at quarter of the price of Scottish Caithness. You know, and if you want to give good architecture and affordable, and it's not good architecture shouldn't be only for the rich. You and I agree on that. And you're always having these dilemmas all the time. You know, should I be importing that because it's cheaper, or should I use something local? We're using at NED, that project, we use windows that were made in Dornoch using Scottish timber, and I'm trying all that I can, but yeah, maybe that will change with Brexit. So I'm trying to make sure, and all the cladding larch is grown in Scotland. I'd like the CLT industry to kick off. If I can do anything to do that, I will help.
Who were the contractors in Inverness? It wasn't
so they're a company that got bought recently, a Carbon Dynamic. They do modular CLT, and they've gone now. That's a sad story.
Oh.
But they've been bought by someone else. But I've kept in touch with some of the guys who work for them who've set up little satellite. I'm very keen to support young entrepreneurial builders and furniture makers and makers.
Do you know Neil Sutherland of Macar?
I do. Well, he's really amazing guy, and he's full of flattery. He says, "You be the architect, Mary, and I'll make it." You know, but architects in collaboration.
Yes.
Is such a I've always wanted to do it, and it's really hard because his architecture is very different from mine. But I love him for saying I build houses made out of trees grown in Scotland. That's his entire thing. But his architecture and mine is very different, and then we like each other a lot. I know that, but I haven't got that far. I must go and try.
Okay, I wonder whether there are any other points or questions that you would like to ask Mary. Remember to switch back on your mic if you wish to do that. Has anyone got a point to make, or something they'd like to ask Mary directly?
Please. I could talk about kayaking.
Does that help your creativity in terms of thinking about if you're going out on a project, Mary, and you're in a setting where you can kayak and also be on site? Is that an incredibly amazing situation for you?
Yeah, I'm really lucky. I just got a job inquiry rather on Tiree, which I have kayak round and bike round already, and I know that landscape. And I don't live there, and I'm not from there, but I've walked and cycled and kayaked it. And I am really interested in the imprint of humans on these landscapes. The ruins and things are staggering. And the Black House on Tiree is specific to Tiree. And one of my rants is what's happened to these islands with the kind of the Uber cottage. I call it, you know, and that way if the proportions and scale go, then you've lost it. You can put as many turf, you know, as you want, but it's still, you know. So Tyree, yeah, lucky me, I've already kiked it, but that doesn't stop me. I'll go over to Gunner and Cole if I can when I go. I do turn up at site visits with a boat on my roof and bikes on my car, and they look a bit suspicious sometimes. On the other hand, like jobs. Sorry?
Do you ever build in the city? Have you done?
No, not for 20 years. No.
Would you if you were asked?
Yeah, yes.
Reluctantly.
Yes, but I don't think anyone, I would never get asked really. What I'd really like to do is a building that isn't domestic. I think the skills in this office of the forensic analysis of site and materials and technology and brief, and the talented guy, they're never here, they're not here, obviously. If we could take that talent and put it into an arts building or an education building, I'd be thrilled. I just don't see why our profession is divided so much. It's a shame. I could never get a school. I could never get it's a shame.
You did a very good building when you were with Dulcas on RSA. I seem to remember that was a community building, wasn't it?
I've done 2 village halls. That's kind, Robin. Lost a fortune. It was a financial disaster, but never mind.
Well, that's a good place to finish. Lost a fortune, a financial disaster. Unless there's any other further questions or points. I'd like everyone just briefly to unmute themselves and give a show of support to Mary for giving up her time in preparation and for walking us around this her wonderful home and showing and talking about her practice. Thank you very much. 2 weeks' time on Thursday, the 17th of September, we've got the last of our live at the Academicians Studios. That's the painter and artist Keith McIntyre, RSA elect. We've got this confirmed happening now, Elena? We've been in touch? Yeah, good stuff. So I hope to see many of you then. And look out, I think we'll be making announcements towards the end of October regarding the next series and who they might be. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Robin, did you have one last point there?
No.
All right, okay.
I was just enjoyed that very much, Mary. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all, and see you all soon.